Hi, my name is Jonathan Manning, and I'm here to tell you all about my favorite cacti. I'm not sure if many of you know, but cacti are coveted by collectors all over the world for their exotic beauty. I mean, I grew up around here, so the exotic part I'm not sure about. They're pretty common or in this area, but I do love cacti. And for me, it's mainly because of the irony of it. You know, they're a lot of them without flowers on them, you may just walk by and not notice, and they thrive, they survive in these most extreme climates on the planet. And the thorns, a lot of them have thorns, you know, downright deadly, you know. And after all that, they pop out some of the most delicate, beautiful flowers of anything in the plant kingdom. So for me, that's just, it's amazing. And to me, it's one of the things I love about cacti. Another thing would be the use in our landscapes here in the desert as far as water conservation. I mean, there is no plant as good at conserving water as cacti are. And I love that they're gaining more popularity recently. And I just want to thank you all for joining us today to learn more about how you can utilize some of these cacti in your own yard, help save some water, help enjoy the beauty and the amazement of them and their special place in our landscapes. So first, I'd like to talk a little bit about cacti in general. There's about 1,750 wild species of cacti, and that's all the way from Canada to the tip of South America. The cacti, that's what makes them different than other succulents, is they're from the Americas. Succulents is just a real general term for anything that holds water in their stems and leaves. So there's a lot of types of succulents. Cacti is one type of succulent that's from the Americas, and as I say, they're so variable, and they go from Canada, where obviously they got to deal with that much cold, all through the United States and through Mexico and Central America. Now they're in the tropics, where there's cacti like dragon fruit, if you didn't know, is a cactus. And so they're jungle cactus. They grow up in the canopy of the rainforest, and they have to store water through the dry season, but the other part of the year is torrential rain, so they deal with that in the middle there in the tropics. And then you go into South America, and again you're reaching really, really dry climates, deserts, and then all the way down to really, really cold climates again. And there's some type of cacti that live in all of those climate zones. So there's plenty that live perfectly well in our climate, and those are the ones I'll talk about today, is the ones that are very well adapted to our specific Sonoran Desert. They're not all native here, but they all love and thrive here. And so cacti and succulents are both good at storing water. That's what makes them so good at water conservation. We're going to find out the ones that you put the least amount of work into and get the most amount of benefits out of. I brought several samples of some of my favorites, and we're going to talk about them in groups. So the first group is the prickly pears. And as far as range goes, they definitely have the widest range of any other group of cacti. Those are the ones that really get up into Canada and into the furthest points of South America. So the couple that I brought are one of the smallest ones and one of the biggest ones. So they range in size from 15 to 20 foot tree type things, like the nopal cactus can be. And they also could be a 1 foot kind of ground cover, like the beaver tail cactus could be. So first we'll talk about the beaver tail. This little guy, it's even small enough you could grow it in a pot. You could also put it out in the landscape, full sun, frost, everything it tolerates, and it sprawls along the ground. And you'll see by the picture, beautiful flowers in the spring. Lots and lots of pink flowers. Pink is unique in the prickly pear group because most of them have yellow flowers that honestly aren't real spectacular. Sometimes they're more known for the pads or other things, but beaver tail is definitely known for the flowers, and it's a beautiful bright pink flower show in the spring. Sometimes so many flowers you can hardly see the plant underneath them. And that's what it's mainly known for. And it doesn't take up a lot of space. A lot of prickly pears, people complain that they planted a little one pad out there in the yard and it takes over the yard. And some of them have the bigger thorns, and you don't want to really walk by or touch any of them because they have, even the ones that don't have long thorns, they have the short thorns that are itchy when they get in your skin. So beaver tail's a real good one, stays out of the way, nice and easy to contain, either in a pot or a small patch of the yard, and you get all those flowers out of it. So beaver tail is definitely one of my favorites. They're purely native also. I've seen them in washes right around here, out on hikes around town, and they, like I say, they can handle anything this climate has to offer as far as cold, hot, you know, full sun, all that. So a very hardy, very beneficial one to have in the yard. The next one would be another one that I didn't bring a sample of, Santa Rita prickly pear, purple prickly pear. is, you can see by the picture there, is a very common one around town. It's not as much known for the flowers in this case, but it's known for the really pretty pads, the leaf segments of them. And those turn red, especially in the wintertime, especially under drought conditions. In the nursery, a lot of times we give them so much water, they don't turn the bright red color they do out in the landscape. When you make them dry out a little bit, and that red color of the pads will come out. And it's a very good one. It does get a little taller, maybe 2-3 feet tall, and can get out of control a little bit size-wise, but you can always trim them. We'll talk about that at the end of the course here, about how to trim them if they get too out of control. But so purple prickly pear, Santa Rita prickly pear, same thing. That's another really commonly used one and really beneficial one for landscapes. Not as much for a pot. It would last in a pot for a little while, but it's more so out for the yard. This one's definitely out for the yard. The next one is this nopal cactus, and this is not a wild cactus. You know, there's wild species that grow on their own out there in the desert everywhere, and then this one is actually a cultivated crop. You know, just like corn, Native Americans in Mesoamerica brought this thing from like a wild cactus to a cultivated garden plant, more or less, crop. And it produces a couple things that are edible, so this one is good for edible landscape. Or permaculture, that kind of thing. So it's something you can have as a landscape use and also get some food benefit out of it. And the picture there shows a straight line of them that I have in the front of my property, and it has turned into a 8-foot solid wall of cacti out there. And it's a good barrier for the sound from the street and a visual barrier. And these things get real big. There's 2 ways to trim them, and I'll mention real quick. If you trim a lot, then you get, I'll switch slides here, the vegetable part of the food that this provides. If you trim a lot, they constantly make new pads, tender new pads, and that's what you would eat as a vegetable. You can look into that more. They're called nopales, where, you know, in the region where they're very popular. And if you trim a lot, that's what you get. And you would have a smaller plant that you could maintain almost in the corner of a garden. If you wanted fruit, which is the next food product that these produce, then that would be the variety of fruits that you can get out of these type of cacti. And that would be, you don't trim at all. If you want fruit, then you just let them grow, you let them get as big as they can, and after 3 or 4 years, they start to really produce fruit. And the fruit is interesting because especially in Mexico and Latin America, other countries that really have a good market for this fruit, they produce new varieties all the time, just like we do with apples here. It's like they hybridize and they make better, sweeter, less seedy, all these different kinds of fruit. So in the picture there's a little variety of different colors, yellow, pink, orange, purple. You can buy in grocery stores around town now, especially the dark purple one if you want to just try some fruit. If you want to buy a plant for a specific kind of fruit, you have to know, they all look the same. I've bought many plants that look exactly like that one, and they come out with different kinds of fruit, yellow, orange, whatever. So if you really want the fruit, investigate it a little bit and get that cutting or plant from somebody that you know knows what kind of fruit that produces. But very useful in landscape, big one though, so out in the yard. And that's about it on prickly pears. There's many more, all the way from itty bitty little bunny ears ones that you can grow in a pot forever to native prickly pears. There's ones that grow right out there in the desert. All those are different kinds of prickly pears. It's a wonderful group. You can have all different kinds, but those are a couple of my favorites. Okay, so the next one that I love it's a big group, and we usually call them in the trade Trichocereus hybrid. Hard to say, hard to remember. And hybrids, because there's not really one species of cacti. People who cultivate cacti, breed, for example, they pick different species, and a lot of this whole group, they interbreed with each other. So you get this endless combination of flower color and stripes and variegated and all different shapes, colors, and sizes of flower. And so this is a big group for collectors, breeders. We all love them. You can collect them forever, trying to get your next favorite one. And so I'll talk about it as a group in general. They're called torch cactus. If you go to a nursery and look for just the general basics of it, you'd find torch cactus. And they come in, the biggest one is called Argentine giant, is in the same family, but it gets just big white flowers. And it's the biggest, sprawliest plant. If you want to take up a lot of the yard and have lots and lots of giant white flowers, then Argentine giant's a good one. The other ones I see most commonly sold now, especially in kind of box stores, is seedlings. So people just grow all the seeds that come up from the cactus fruit in this group, and they come up with all different flowers. So in that case, I would look through, if you go and check them out every once in a while, buy it with a flower on it. And that's the case, then you know what flower it's going to make forever. It could be pink, orange, yellow, white, stripy, whatever. So the flowers on this one is definitely the selling point. They are also hardy though. That's what I love about them. I don't need a greenhouse for them. It's like you can put them out in the full sun, and no matter how cold it gets, it doesn't freeze them. So in general, they're very, very hardy, easy to keep. You don't need this special environment to baby them with, and you can just keep collecting all these different flowers forever. I've gotten, I mean, this is a nice little one with a really interesting flower that I got on like a Facebook marketplace, you know, people who have only 3 or 4 of them in their house, and every time it makes a baby, they go and put one up for sale. You find all kinds of things, new varieties, collect them forever, and that's one of my favorite ones. That'd be the best place to buy them, is at, you know, at a nursery you would look for one with either really well marked or what color flower it is, or find one with a flower on it to buy. Or from somebody like that, like on Facebook or lots of different places you can find people who post what they have for sale and pictures of the flower and things like that. But it's a very big group, and like I say, it's not even really one species of cacti. They have interbred all kinds of species that all make really, really pretty flowers. So that is the next favorite of mine. I have a big collection myself. There's a picture there of what it would look like in the ground in the landscape. That's a red flowered one, really big. Each of those flowers probably 3 inches in diameter, and there's 20 of them on there all at once. It happens often. That's the other beauty of some of these I have, that they bloom all the time, the whole warm season, from early spring to late summer, late fall. They bloom through that whole period over and over and over again, whereas some cactus, it's once a year. Sometimes it's only 1 flower a year. Some of them will actually skip a whole year. So as far as these go, it's nice. They also breed for that, not just the way the flower looks, but how often they bloom. So some of them have a really long bloom period. Here's one in a pot. So they also can be put in a pot. Probably not the bigger ones like Argentine Giant, but a lot of the little ones, this one would be fine in a pot forever. And you'd get flowers out of it like that. And that's the Trichocereus hybrids, and they're basically for beautiful flowers. Okay, so my next favorite is totem poles. And this one, of all the ones I'll talk about, is the one that's the nicest to play with. A lot of people like it. They're safe. It's a safe cacti, you know. So totem poles there actually is there's a wild cactus that lives just south of here on my way to Rocky Point, Sonora. I've seen it many times out in the desert. It has thorns though. The wild version has thorns, very uniformly going up the sides. And these are varieties that we've found in cultivation that have no thorns. They have the irregular shape, interesting shape. And it's just a really, really nice cactus to have around. They get big, they can get big. You could pay a lot of money or wait a lot of time and have a huge specimen in the middle of your front yard. Or you can keep them in pots for a long time like this, you know. Smaller plants you can keep in pots for a very long time. They come in different varieties, so they are all different ones that we've found growing them over the years. They just mutate a little bit and a new one kind of shows up. So the most common are skinny and fat. They've kind of always had those. A kind of newer variety is twisted. So the twisted one in the middle here is a lot like the skinny one. But you can see a little bit of the way it grows is a twisted, almost screw type pattern. So they come in different, you know, shapes and sizes, but if you're interested in one or the other, you can kind of search them out in nurseries. The most common is probably this regular skinny one. The skinny one grows faster, more upright and faster, with not building so much girth like the fat one does. So the fat one, as you see in the picture, it's a lot more bumpy, I'll call it, and each branch is thicker in diameter, and they grow slower upright. But it does have a little more of a unique shape that way, almost looks like the candle wax or something. And so the fatter one grows slower, skinny one grows faster, and the twisted one is a lot like the skinny one, like I say. So whatever you want to do with them, they're good to have around. The next slide here is the flower, which most people don't see. A lot of people have always seen them like this or a little bigger in somebody's front yard. When they do get finally to the height, like mature height, all the tips of the branches will turn into what you see on the slide there. They almost get like, it looks like fur, but it's really finally they get thorns up at the very top. long bristles, and that's to protect the flower buds and the flowers that come out. And the flowers aren't very big, only about 1 inch in diameter, but they're nice and pretty pink. Not really what it's known for, but just so you know, eventually if your specimen gets that mature, the tips will turn into that unique form there. So that's all about totem poles. Next favorite, hedgehog cactus. These are purely native also. Native, I see them out hiking in washes. They're native to the whole Southwest, different varieties, color flowers. The normal flower color is pink, hot pink and orange and red. And they're just hardy. They deal with any kind of cold we can get here. Full sun, heat, all that. And they don't take up much space, I like about this one. They're small. So about, you know, the average size is about 1 foot tall, and a clump that gets about, I've seen them maybe up to 3 feet wide. They can stay much smaller in a pot. It's a good one for a pot. If you want to keep them little in a pot, just don't water them quite as much, and they'll stay that way for a long time, and they still bloom. And the blooms are, again, what they're known for. These have, you know, 2-inch diameter, most of them, flowers that are hot pink or a little bit smaller orange. And you'll see by the slides here, that's a strawberry hedgehog. This one has been in a pot for quite some time, just still doing good. I get 4 or 5 flowers out of it, you know, each year. And if it was in the ground though, like the slide there, they just get bigger and more flowers each year. This one doesn't have as long of a flowering season, but again, it is amazing in the spring. All the flowers come at once, and a lot of times you can't see the plant underneath all the flowers in that spring wave of really pretty blooms. That is strawberry hedgehog. The next one is Claret Cup. Those are the two most common. There's many kinds of hedgehog cactus. The strawberry with the pink flowers and the Claret Cup with the orangey red flowers are the two most common. You can put them together. You can, you know, like I say, very good addition to any landscape. And it doesn't take up a lot of room. It's not a big, you know, you don't have to dedicate a lot of space in the yard to have one. And they can handle that out there where nothing else grows, blasting sun kind of place. So now we've talked about my favorites, just a few, but those are the ones, to remember, that are very well adapted to our climate. I think they're very underused. They're easy to grow. You wouldn't have as much problems with root rot or heat stress or frost damage. And so those are the ones that really I like to recommend, just because I don't see them out there as much as I think they should be. There's endless choices of other cacti that would work great in our yards though. Like I say, you can keep getting more and more forever. Hopefully you do, save some water, enjoy the flowers. But that's just about which ones to select. So now let's talk a little bit about how to take care of the ones you have. So a little bit of care. First would be water. Then you can see by the slide, that's what cacti look like when they get a little bit dry. They shrivel. That's what they're made to do. So the pad type, the prickly pear, you can see the little wrinkles in the skin there, and that's okay. That's what they're made to do. The other situation is too much water, and what that does is a lot of things. It'll get them fatter and fatter and fatter where they swell up with water. That can cause problems with insects, like especially prickly pear get more of a little white bug all over them called cochineal scale. That's usually because they're getting too much water. They're too juicy, too good. So that's one kind of not even as big of a problem. The worst problem is root rot or rot, bacterial rot. So they get too much water, they get soppy, the rot gets into them, and the whole thing falls over, and it's a stinky mess at the ground there where they fall over at. All those is a lot of times from too much water. Not always, but usually it's from too much water. So watch the water. I like to let them almost show a little bit of signs of drought. That's that little bit of wrinkle in the prickly pears. And in any kind of columnar cactus, as they come up, it's like an accordion. The pleats in them can get, they get fatter and fatter in diameter, and those pleats almost go away. And as they dry out, those pleats get deeper and deeper and deeper, and that shows you they're needing a little bit of water. If they get to a point where the skin is turning a little bit yellow, you're right at the edge there of maybe causing some damage. So, but that's okay. This whole thing happens so slow, you got like weeks to figure it out before you really do any damage with drought. And that's the side I would ride, is drought, not too much water. So if you're not sure if you should water, don't. The one rule I like to follow is when the ground is bone dry, even an inch down, you dig a little bit and it's still bone dry, then you could water. You don't have to usually, but that's the first opportunity you have to water, is when that soil is just bone dry. Same rule in a pot. Pot or in the ground, if you dig in the potting soil and if it's just bone dry, you could water if you want that cactus to really puff up and grow a little more, or you could leave them go until you see the signs of drought. Either way, that's how you really ride the line of efficiency with water, is if you wait till they show a little bit of sign of drought, you know that you're going as long as you possibly can and saving as much water as you possibly can. And cacti are made to do it. That's what they're made to do in the desert, is when they get water, they suck it up and store it for as long as they can. One little trivia, a mature saguaro can absorb 200 gallons of water all in one rainstorm and store it for as long as it needs to until it rains again. So that's what they're made to do. So following those rules, when you do water, lots of water, it's okay. You can't overwater anything in one day. Overwatering is an extended period of time that never dries out, not in one setting. So you can throw the hose on it, is what I like to do. You drip the hose on it, make a nice big puddle around. The cacti have roots that just extend real shallow and in all directions for a very long way. So you can make as big of a puddle as you can with the hose, leave it on for maybe 4 hours, soaking in real deep. And that'll give that cactus enough water to absorb and last it for months afterwards. So it's a matter of a lot of water when you water. Same thing with a pot. You not only fill it up once and let it drain, you fill it up a couple times. Fill it up and let it drain. And then when that soil is very, very wet, then you leave it until it goes bone dry again. That's watering with cactus. Trimming. A lot of people don't know how to even start with trimming. So you can see the slides there. On the left is a prickly pear, and you always try to trim at the joint between the pads, right? It's a lot like tree pruning. You want to, when you're done, you want the smallest wound possible, because that wound is where that rot will get in and maybe take out the whole rest of the cactus afterwards. So you try to cut them at the joint. That leaves a tiny little wound afterward. And another benefit is when you see it afterward, it doesn't look all chopped up, you know, like if you go halfway through all the pads. It looks like nothing happened. It just looks smaller. So that's another benefit. The picture on the right is a columnar cactus, more like the totem poles would be. And they have this really nice candelabra form usually. And if one of those branches kind of breaks in the middle or gets damaged from frost sometimes, then you can take that branch all the way to the ground, is what I like to do, and then chop it off. And you can see the angle I did it on. That is so, when you cut a columnar cactus off horizontal, what happens is the tissue shrinks in and it makes a bowl. And when that bowl gets any kind of water in it from the hose or rain or whatever, that water never goes away and it rots its way down into the rest of the plant. So you want that cut to be on an angle where any water that lands in it rolls off the side and doesn't stay there in a bowl. That's mainly the thing that could hurt a columnar cactus after you trim it. You can also cut columnar cactus right at the joint. They also have segments sometimes where one branch kind of tapers off and the next one comes off. That'd be a good place to cut it too. That way you get it at the smallest wound afterward. So that's the way you trim kind of either type of cacti. The next thing is propagation. So you can grow cacti from either cuttings. All of them, the only ones I've never had luck with is saguaros and barrel cactus. Those are not as much from cuttings, but pretty much all the other cacti that I've tried work really good from a cutting. And what you do with the cutting is you take, again, same way as trimming, you want that wound to be as small as possible. So it's always good to take your cutting at a joint where it's a small little wound. If you have to go through the middle of a pad or a column to do it, then you just really have to let that cut surface dry out really, really good. And nobody wants to wait around as long as it takes to do that. I mean, I leave cactus that I have to trim like that for a month or two in the shade. When it's too long is only when it starts to grow on its own and bend weird. Other than that, you can leave it in the shade until that wound looks just like cork, like tree bark. And you don't want it to be juicy at all anymore. You don't want to be able to like push your finger into it. You just have to have a really calloused over wound. And then you put it in a pot, buried down to the point where it doesn't fall over is mainly the most important thing. You know, you want enough of it buried to hold it in place. And you put it in nice, good cactus mix. And cactus mix to me is really good regular potting soil, blended half and half with pumice is my favorite cactus mix to mix on your own. I don't usually buy it called cactus mix. I'll make it myself, but it's half and half, pumice and really good potting soil, whatever you can find. And after I get that cactus mix in here, you know, you bury the cutting halfway or so, enough so it doesn't fall over. You water it one really, really good time, and then not again until you think it's starting to fatten up and grow. And that's the way you do cuttings in general. There's lots of, you know, other details for size goes and all that, but that's the basics of doing cuttings. The next way to produce cactus, and all cactus can be produced from seed, is in a little 4-inch pot like this. Is my favorite way to do it. Even on a big commercial scale, we still do it the same way. And this is perfect for a windowsill, a really bright window you can put it in. And what I've done here is it's a 4-inch pot with my favorite seedling mix is 75% coarse sand and 25% peat moss. And what it does is make a real tight mix so the seed doesn't like get lost between the cracks of a chunkier mix. So 75% sand, coarse sand, and 25% peat moss. I've put it in there, water it real good, and then you sprinkle the seed over the top. You don't bury the seed, right on top. And then it'll be on top of really wet soil, and you cover it with the Ziploc like this, which fit perfectly on a 4-inch pot. And what it does is make a nice little steamy greenhouse for the seed to sprout in. And you want to get some light. Most cactus have seed that need some light to sprout. So that's why they're on top, not buried too deep. And you put it in a bright spot. I wouldn't put it in the full sun in the summertime for sure, but a really, really bright windowsill or out on the porch is a perfect spot for them. And then you do not open this to water it until they sprout. So it's that one watering in the beginning. You should see dew on the inside of the bag the whole time. And that's the way every cactus seed I've ever tried to sprout comes up really well like that. And then you get something where, you know, after they sprout in there and they start getting a little bigger, you can, a lot of times I'll rip a hole in the bag to let some air in to kind of acclimate them gradually over a couple weeks. Let more air in there to dry them out a little bit and they get used to it. And then there you get something like this. So these were seedlings just last year in September, and now they've grown that much already. I mean, people think cactus are hugely slow, but if you have a little bit of patience, you can get some seedlings out of it. And this would be the point where you can separate these then and put them in their own pots. So that's seedlings, and it's really fun to do. I think it's a fun project even for kids to do. If you can't find, usually you can find packs of cactus seeds that are mixed. You can buy them online. You can also find cactus with fruit on them. There's like those prickly pear fruit, for example. You could get the seeds out of there, and I don't even clean them up very well. I kind of just smoosh the pulp with the seeds in it on the surface of that soil, water it real good once, and then put the bag over it, and there they come. So it's a fun little project to do, and that's all the ways I know of to propagate cacti. The tools of the trade here are a lot of them, you know, you need something like this to grab them with the thorns, and the littler ones you can grab and put in or pull out or transplant or whatever you got to do with them. To make cuts on the columnar cactus or even prickly pear, an old bread knife works perfect to kind of saw through that. Pruners, like in the photo, work too, but a lot of times a bread knife comes in really handy a lot of times to trim cacti. And as far as transplanting bigger cacti, a little trick would be you have the hole prepared and you put the plant next to it, you lay it over as gently as possible. While it's on its side, you wiggle the pot off, and then you can work with the root to get it in the hole. Sometimes it takes a shovel to kind of, you know, touch the top of the cacti with and pull it up, but that's pretty much it. On a bigger one, they're a little harder to maneuver, and these don't work quite as good, but that's pretty much all I know about cacti. So make sure that you at least consider some of these for your yard. Beautiful flowers, water conservation, easy, and lots of bang for your buck.